We're going to spend a bit of time in God's Word together this morning. Often find that when I'm reading through the Bible and reading about Jesus, that a lot of the things that he says and a lot of the things that he does are pretty radical, pretty surprising, pretty different. And the thing that we're looking at today, I guess, for me, is one of those things that Jesus does that is surprising, that's pretty radical, that is challenging or maybe inspiring. So let's have a bit of a look at that together. And if you've got your Bible there, you can open up to the book of Mark, chapter 1. So you can pull it out, either your book or your phone or something like that. We're looking at Mark chapter 1. And just as you find it, for a little bit of context, this passage, Jesus is having a pretty busy day. I'll tell you the verse in a second. But Jesus is having a pretty busy day in Mark chapter 1. It's a Sabbath day at this point of the passage that we're reading. It's a Sabbath day, so Jesus has started the day at the synagogue, and he's there with all of the Jewish people and the Jewish teachers, and he's up the front, he's doing sort of a lot of teaching there, and people are amazed at the things that he's saying. And in the middle of this meeting at the synagogue, a man comes forward who's got a demon, and he's talking with Jesus, and it's a pretty wild interaction that happens between them. And Jesus, draws the demon out of the man, sets him free, changes his life forever. Everyone around is just amazed at seeing what Jesus has done. And from there, from that scene, Jesus heads in Mark 1:29. So we're going to pick it up there. Notes have just gone to sleep. Mark chapter 1, verse 29. This is what it says. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. So after this sort of encounter at the synagogue, then they leave and they go back to Simon and Andrew's house, and his mother-in-law is not well, and Jesus sort of has another amazing experience of changing her life, healing her. And then we read on in verse 32, that evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. So it's a fairly big day that Jesus is having so far. Once the sun sets, he's already had a big enough day at the synagogue and then back at Peter's house. And then after that, once the sun sets, he's just as busy. People from all over the village are coming to Jesus to get healing, to be, sort of free of this different afflictions that they have. And I'm sure it would have been a pretty amazing day to be a part of for Jesus, for the disciples, for all those people who got healed or had a family member or a friend healed. Sure, it would have been a transformative day for a lot of people. But you would expect or could kind of understand if by the end of the day, Jesus is both physically and emotionally spent. When I have a day where there's, even if it's good stuff, some big life-changing, transformative things happening, often by the end of it, you're like, that was great, but I'm a bit drained now. That was a bit full on. Well, what's really interesting for me, and that sort of shocking part of it, is what Jesus does the next day. Something that we see him doing a lot throughout the Bible. A lot of the different gospel accounts sort of talk about this kind of thing. And obviously the disciples notice Jesus doing it a lot because they write a lot about it. So we'll read on in chapter 1, verse 35 to 38. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, so this is the next day, while it was early in the morning, still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so that I can preach there also. That is why I have come." Jesus has had this big night of healing people and caring for people. No doubt his, morning plans could easily have been, have a bit of a sleep in, have a bit of a recovery from this big night that he'd had the day before. But instead, in verse 35, we're told that while it's still early enough in the morning that it's dark outside, which is never a fun time to get up, but Jesus is up and he's off, he's out of the house, it says, and he finds a solitary place to spend some time with God, to connect with his Father. Jesus was often surrounded by pretty urgent things, by pretty important things. That day before is just an example of it. People whose lives are falling apart, they're a mess. Jesus has an opportunity to change their life forever just in a small moment. Those things are pretty urgent. I mean, a lot of things that fill our time, fill our days, they can seem important, and then something really urgent comes in, a sickness or an illness or something big happening to a friend, or you have a wedding coming up and it's kind of, or whatever else you might have had on that day is scratched because you want to be there for those people for their wedding. There's different important things that come up, different urgent things in our lives. And Jesus definitely his life was full of the important and the urgent. He had opportunities to really powerfully change people's lives and transform them forever. And I guess for me, when I sort of think about my life and the things that I consider important and urgent and, that I stress about or worry about, or that I spend a lot of time thinking about or feel important, when you weigh them up next to the things that Jesus was doing or that he had going on, obviously it's not much of a comparison. But, I'm not Jesus, we're not Jesus. It's not really about that. But often I feel like there are times in my day, and I'm sure that a lot of you guys feel the same at different points, where there's just not enough hours in the day to get done the things that we need done. I don't know whether that's an experience anyone else has ever had. It just feels like, almost you need to get up earlier just to try and get everything done, or you have to, you barely find time to eat through the day until a bit later on, or you have to eat while you're doing other things or whatever. We all have those days from time to time. And yeah, if those things that I feel are urgent and pressing and important are priorities in my life, often I don't necessarily take the time to find solitude like Jesus did, to retreat, to pray. Often my life can just be sort of overtaken by those things, that to-do list of things I need to get done. I've got a lot happening today. I've got a lot happening this week. I don't really have time. There's too much urgent, important stuff going on. And that, I think, is why it's so amazing, this passage here in Mark chapter 1, that even in the midst of all the important and urgent stuff that Jesus has going on, he's always prioritizing spending quality time connecting with his Father. I think that's quite shocking. I think that's quite amazing that Jesus, it's not just when he has spare time, it's not just when he has quiet time or doesn't have many other important things happening. Jesus always makes it a priority to find solitude and to pray. And solitude is quite an interesting thing, isn't it? Jesus would often go and find solitude, sort of go and be by himself. Throughout history, Christian monks, maybe the famous example, the extreme example of people who took this idea of solitude to the extreme. They went and, devoted themselves to being in connection with God. They spent most of their days in prayer and connecting with him and reflection. And they even sort of cut themselves off. They were so devoted to solitude that they almost cut themselves off from the whole rest of the world, which is a pretty extreme approach to it. I mean, Jesus didn't really do that. He often let himself then be interrupted, and he went out. He wasn't that sort of monk style of living. But I guess the reason why I think this is kind of interesting for us to be thinking about at the moment, and why I've been thinking a bit more about it, is because when we think about solitude, what's happening in our world right now, what's happening in our Central Coast and our city and our state, is something quite unlike anything that's ever happened during my lifetime, probably for most of us, something that we've never really experienced, which is government mandated solitude. that's quite a unique thing. That's something that I've definitely never had before, where we're not able to meet up with other people in person. We can still meet up, a phone call or catch up on Zoom, but we're not allowed to go out and see each other. And for most of us, different gatherings, social things, church or whatever else, different events that might be on, they're all cancelled or indefinitely postponed. Like there's nowhere to go. Even for a lot of us, social interaction at work, or some people can't work at all during this time. Some people can't go into work and have to just work at home. There's more solitude going around at the moment than usual. Government mandated solitude, probably more solitude than a lot of us have ever experienced in our life. And lockdown has had a lot of challenges for a lot of people. Definitely, there's a lot of things that are hard about this time of lockdown. As a community, we want to be looking and caring for people who are struggling during this time. But maybe if there was a silver lining to it, maybe if there was an opportunity in the lockdown, maybe one of those opportunities would be that we have an opportunity to spend time in solitude, to connect with God, maybe even in ways that we haven't had that opportunity in sort of normal life, to spend time speaking with him, listening to him, to actually embrace the mandated solitude and make the most of it. For me, I know that there's a big difference in my day or even in my week, those days that I start the day by spending time with God and connecting with God, where I start the day praying something like, God, help me to see how you're at work today. Help me to know your will for me today. Help me to walk this day, in tune with your spirit. I know that a day is very different when I start the day that way versus if I just start the day, jump up out of bed, rush straight into the first thing. For me, spending that time with God first thing, makes a huge impact. And I know for a lot of other people, it does the same. It has the potential to just completely reframe the day. There's a great quote from Martin Luther. When someone asked him what his plans were for the day, someone said to him, "What are you up to today, Mr. Luther?" And his reply was this, a great quote. He says, work from early until late. In fact, I have so much to do that I shall spend the first 3 hours in prayer. For him, in that, there's sort of this, it wasn't that he had this really busy day, work from early until late, so I have no time to pray. For him, it was almost the opposite. It was because he had such a busy day that he needed to spend that quality time in prayer. And for him, it was almost like, for him, prayer was like eating a big meal at the start of the day, knowing that you've got this big thing coming up through the day, to have a big meal to fuel you for the rest of the day. Maybe we sometimes feel of prayer, or spending time, like connecting with God, that it's some sort of duty or, some obligation we should do. Not necessarily a bad thing, but just, something we really should do more of, or, almost a thing of guilt or, like an obligation. But I think, that idea of it being more like prayer and connecting with God is more like refueling. It's the nourishing, it's the giving us the energy and the stamina to approach the things that we have coming up. It's almost like that idea of eating or sleeping or drinking. And, I'm no doctor, but if somebody came to me and said, Will, I've been feeling really average lately. I've been really struggling. I've been feeling faint and I have a headache and my stomach's really sore for some reason. You might ask them, well, what have you had to eat lately? And if they said, oh, actually, I haven't eaten in a few days, you might go, oh, well, that could be the problem. Yeah, maybe try and eat something and see how you feel after that. Or if someone came to me and said, oh, Will, I've just been feeling really lethargic and really tired. I've got no energy. I can barely keep my eyes open. Oh, well, how did you sleep last night? I had about 20 minutes sleep. Oh, well, maybe try and pump those numbers up a little bit and, have a bit more sleep and see how you feel after that. These things are kind of like silly scenarios. They're a bit unrealistic because we know what to do when we're feeling hungry. We know what to do when we're feeling tired. We don't usually need someone to tell us what the solution is there. But often when we're feeling spiritually tired, often if there's a season in life where we're feeling distant from God, or we're feeling kind of purposelessness or disconnected, or just kind of not in a great place, sometimes it's not necessarily our natural reaction to actually spend that time with God or to connect with God. Sometimes it can almost even go the other way, where we're feeling kind of disconnected, so we don't spend time with God, or, you know, where we're feeling so flat out and so stressed that we feel like we don't have time to connect with God. Often, in fact, it's when life is the most hectic, when we're struggling to keep up, that, you know, that is often the time when connecting with God is one of the first things to go. But often that really should be the time when more than ever we're pressing into God, when we're actually seeking him, we're asking him to be with us, and looking for that guidance and that comfort in those times. Just to finish off, you know, one of the greatest things for me this year, or one of the things I've really enjoyed this year anyway, is a little afternoon boys Bible study group thing that's happening on a Tuesday afternoon, with some of the different sort of 17, 18-year-old guys from our youth group, including Ben Epperson, I can see him over there, and a few others from church. And each week we get together, we go through the Bible, and one of the big things that we do is we make a commitment to each other. We, you know, it might be something like, this week I'm going to start my days reading the Bible or in prayer, or it might be, you know, I'm going to sit down with Eva and we'll go through this devotion book together, or something like that. We'll make some sort of commitment for the week. And for me, that's such a helpful thing, to actually have some accountability, to have some people who, you know, you've said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to spend this time with God, and then you have to report back next week, either, yes, I did it, no, I didn't do it. But having some accountability in that, I find really helpful. And maybe that's a practical tool for other people. If you are someone who really wants to spend time connecting with God, really wants to spend that time praying or reading the Bible or retreating or finding solitude or whatever, but it's something that you find hard to do, I've definitely found having some accountability in that to be really helpful. Just, it could be, yeah, a Bible study group, a small group. It could just be one friend or someone in your family to, yeah, hold accountable in that way, or maybe even to, you know, read the Bible together or pray together, you know, whenever. But yeah, that would definitely be, I guess, in terms of a practical tip for someone who might be struggling, that would definitely be something that I'd encourage you to think about as well. To finish off, though, the very, very last thing, I thought that we might actually spend some time now in prayer, just in a bit of reflection. I'm going to try and screen share. Hopefully that's something I'm allowed to do. I think I am. Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to spend a little bit of time in quiet reflection, just for a couple of minutes. There's going to be some music that just sort of gently plays. Yeah, take just a few minutes now to connect with God, to, you know, bring your thoughts to him, maybe even to hear what he's saying to you, just to, yeah, realign, maybe even to just ask God, you know, what is your will for me today? What is your plan for me this week? Asking God to, yeah, walk with you and lead you in that way. And then after that, can everybody see that now? Hopefully, yeah. And, oh, sorry, I had to end it. I'm getting better at Zoom. I was a pro. And then lockdown ended and I forgot how to use it all. Let's try it again. Share screen. Here we go. Share sound. Okay. All right. So there'll be a little video that plays, and yeah, just spend a few minutes, just quiet, solitude wherever you are. Yeah, bringing your thoughts before God. Yeah, Lord God, thank you that you are available for us, that you promise your presence with us, that you have, such a strong desire to hear and to dwell with us. Lord, I pray that we as a people would be in tune with you, that we would desire to connect with you, that we would desire to know you, in the middle of things that might be urgent and important, that might be good or bad, opportunities or crises or whatever we might be facing in life, Lord, that you want to walk with us in all of it. You want to help us. You want to comfort us. You want to guide us. You want to lead us. You want to encourage us. Lord, I pray that you would help us to not try and do it alone, but that we would do it with you. Lord, I pray that at the moment as we are kind of forced apart, even though we can still gather together digitally, and we thank you for the joy and the blessing that it is, we live in such a time that we have that opportunity. Lord, I do pray that we wouldn't let that other opportunity go wanting, or we wouldn't miss that other opportunity to actually maybe embrace the solitude a little at times, embrace the opportunity to connect with you. Maybe this would even be a catalyst for some of us to press in closer to you, to really make it a priority as Jesus did, to find time intentionally to sit with you, to align with you. It's such a joy and a privilege to walk this life with the creator of the universe. And I pray, God, that, we as a church would be a people of prayer, that would be a people in tune with you and connected to your spirit in that way. I pray that you'd bless us through this week. I pray that, you'd help us to continue to walk in step. Amen. Well, we've been talking a bit about prayer today and about, spending time to talk to God. And we've been talking about it in solitude. But when the disciples asked Jesus how to pray, he gave them a very specific prayer. And it's a well-known prayer, and a prayer that sometimes we might pray together if we were in person. Often we might pray together. I thought maybe we would finish today's service by praying together the Lord's Prayer. A great prayer to be thinking about and to be praying together. Nice to be able to spend some time in prayer together. And hope that you can find an opportunity sometime today, sometime this week in solitude, to be connecting with God, recharge those batteries, reconnect, and have that energy and connection to help us through the week.